If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will address them at the end. Take it away, James.
All righty, thank you. Welcome, everyone. My name is James Serra. I'm a data and AI solution architect at Microsoft. I've been in Microsoft about 10 years now. And if you want to know a little bit more about me, I've been in this business for almost 40 years now. If you look behind me, you may see some of the old software from the 80s that is familiar with you. For you, I won't go into my COBOL days, but I've spent a lot of time educating customers, and in Microsoft, I work in the federal space, which is quite interesting right now. And I spend my time teaching customers about various Microsoft products, about data architectures, and what's been getting very popular lately, as you can imagine, is generative AI. And I've had a lot of conversations with customers on how they could use it. You may be familiar with using it on unstructured data like PDF documents or whatnot. And but we're going to get into first talking a little level setting kind of what Gen AI definitions. There's so many things that people get very confused. And then we'll get into using Gen AI, in particular ChatGPT, on semi-structured data. And then that'll be a demo. And then I'll get into Microsoft Fabric AI skill on structured data. And then I'll talk about some industry use cases. And as Julie said, just pop your questions in the chat and I'll answer them at the end, or I may answer them as we go along. What I've been seeing a lot of is the data platform and AI worlds colliding on there. It's using Gen AI not just to answer text questions, but use it on maybe an Excel document or CSV file, and now in structured data. And that's really where you're starting to see the two worlds colliding. And it's only going to get more intense over the next few years. It's amazing where we've come in just in 2 years. So you can imagine that we're going to see a lot of great enhancements that in the bottom line is going to make your answers, the answers to your questions a lot more accurate in there. A little bit about Gen AI. Is it magic? Sometimes I think so. If you go under the details of how large language models and all that work, it does seem like some kind of magic, but it's not as sophisticated as people think. It's not going to take over the world. The bottom line, it's just a vector database, and that's it. But there's a lot of confusion on definitions. So just to go over some of them briefly, you have at a high level AI, artificial intelligence, and it's just performing tasks that a lot faster than humans can do in there. And think of Gen AI and machine learning, they're just subsets of AI. Gen AI is the generative part, is generating new content. That could be text. Now we're starting to see images and video and audio as part of that. And it does this through neural networks. It's a way of a machine learning process that is kind of works the way the human brain works. And that's how it does underneath the covers, which we're not going to go into, but think of it as sort of like the human brain, and that's why it is able to be so fast. And I'd like to say accurate, but we both know that that's where sometimes it struggles with being accurate in the answers in there. Large language models are a type of Gen AI that work against the natural language text on that. I always tell people how do you explain large language models and how they work? I say it's like a really intelligent autocomplete on there, and that's all it's doing underneath the covers is trying to guess the next word in order to reply accurately on there. Now it's obviously much more sophisticated than that, but that's all it's doing, and that's why it could be incorrect, because it's guessing the words. And there are other models instead of large language models that are used to generate images or videos on that, which are becoming very popular now. Machine learning, we'll call it the classic way of doing things now, but it still has an importance on there and the ability to make predictions or decisions in there. So you would still use it. If I'm going to try to predict what customers are going to leave and try to be proactive and maybe send them some coupon or something, I'm going to train a machine learning model on data that can help me predict who would likely to leave. That's something you usually don't want to do with large language models. It's the classic machine learning. So it still has its use. There are some overlapping areas of the two, but you will continue to see machine learning for a long time. OpenAI came out just, OpenAI is a company. It's an organization that has created the Gen AI models in there that are used in ChatGPT and other technologies on there. So when people say OpenAI, it's an organization who created ChatGPT, and ChatGPT as well as Copilot are essentially bots that are built on Gen AI models, large language models, that allow you to interact and ask questions and get answers in there. So you can build your own bot on there, or you can have something that's already done. And ChatGPT and Copilot are something that I use frequently during the day. And the more people learn about them, the more they start using them. It's kind of training your mind to use ChatGPT or Copilot to answer any questions. Kind of, if some of you may remember before there was internet, when that came around, you had to train your mind to go and use the search. And now it's, in many cases, replacing search with ChatGPT or Copilot in there. And then the last one is prompt engineering. That is the practice of creating input prompts to ask the question of a large language model and to make those questions detailed enough so you're getting accurate and relevant answers in there. And that's where a lot of people struggle. If you're not detailed enough with your question to a large language model using, say, ChatGPT, you may get a wrong answer. So you have to learn how to flush out that question, and that's all what's called prompt engineering. So hopefully that level sets the definitions and will help as we continue on here. If you are curious about the large language models, what they're trained on, how did they get so smart? ChatGPT 3, we know, has been published. This is what it trained on. Essentially, the whole internet it's been trained on, including Wikipedia, Reddit, and then a bunch of digital books that are listed on here. So it's like having an expert sitting right next to you because they've been educated on the entire internet in there. And that is how those models were trained. And now there's many different types of models. Some are smaller, some are faster, and it's overwhelming how many different models that are. But the basic models are trained on the entire internet, but then they can also be customized to help in more specific areas. If you're a doctor, it's going to train the model with more medical information than your ChatGPT 3. A little bit about data definitions. Think of unstructured data as text in emails and documents like PDF, Word documents, text documents in there. That's the old school way of asking questions, and it's still relevant, but we're now getting into using the new school of data, which is semi-structured data. Those could be files, logs that are in CSV, Parquet, XML, JSON. They're usually tables, which has rows and columns. And think of Excel as a perfect example of a semi-structured data. And then structured data, which is when I get into demoing AI skills in Fabric, that works on relational databases. Those are SQL tables with rows and columns on there. So that's very new. And eventually, I'll talk about the very end, is solutions will use all of these to help you get a better answer by pulling information from PDF documents, from CSV files, from relational database on there, as well as all the prompt stuff you prompt in there. that's going to make those any answer just a lot more accurate. Model definitions, I mentioned prompt engineering, RAG, it's retrieval augmented generation. That it's improving the performance of the large language model there. And then that's one way to improve the performance. The other is fine tuning, creating a new model using more information on that. And RAG and fine tuning are important concepts to understand. Comparing the two, a fine tuning is taking an existing model, giving it more information, and creating a new model. So think of the entire internet. I go and create a model, and then as soon as I publish it, it's outdated because there's new information on the internet. So maybe I take that new information, or I take some documents and I add it to the large language model. And there's time and expense to that. It could take hours, if not days, to create a new model in there, and you're making the model smarter on that. And so what came about after that, because fine tuning was costly and time consuming, was the RAG method, where in real time you're sending the documents or the search results of new stuff on the internet into the large language model. So you're supplementing it in real time in there. That has the benefit of being more real time, because no matter when you publish a model, it's going to be outdated as soon as it's published for anything that happens after the publishing date. Where the RAG can scan stuff in real time, send it there, so it's always updated, and it's a lot cheaper and quicker to do it that way than building a whole new model, because you're not building any new models with the RAG method. So this has become extremely popular with customers. The slides I definitely will share. I've seen the comments on there. You could email me, or I'll send it to, if you post it somewhere, but all the slides, I'm happy to send everybody a copy. Touching more into the RAG method on here, in Azure, this is how it works. You have these data sources that are say PDF documents. You're extracting the text from those documents and chunking it up, and this is done for performance reasons, and putting that into an index, a vector search index. And so the idea is, if I come in with an app and I ask a question, I don't want to send all the documents to the large language model. I just want to send what's relevant. So it'll look through what could be thousands of documents, the index of those documents, and find out the pieces that are most relevant. So if I'm sending a question and I'm asking about, well, we'll see the Yankees are winning 7-0 right now, and I want to know about more information about the Yankees. And there's a ton of stuff on the internet about that, but maybe I have additional documents about the Yankees that are not on the internet. And I want to ask about my favorite player, Ron Guidry, and I have a document about Ron Guidry that has information that you won't find on the internet. I could ask that question. The vector search is going to go and say, what documents do you have about Ron Guidry? And it's going to find one and send that document along with the question to the large language model, and it's going to answer it, and the answer will be more accurate because now it's supplemented with additional information about Ron Guidry. Many of you were like, who's Ron Guidry? Because it's back in the 70s and 80s, but I'm an old guy. So that's the whole idea of RAG. And it took me a long time to figure this out and simplify it, so hopefully I explain it in a way that makes sense. I'm going to talk about Generative use cases on semi-structured and structured data that deal with querying that semi-structured and structured data and enriching and cleaning the data. There's a lot of other reasons or use cases for Gen AI, but I need to keep this within an hour, so I focus on these two. But you can imagine using Gen AI on things like, well, help me map fields from a source to a destination, or help me identify trends, or help me figure out anomalies in my data. There's all these other use cases, but only two of them will be covered today. So ChatGPT on semi-structured data. This will be the first demo. ChatGPT definition is generative, meaning it's creating new content, and it's pre-trained using one of the models, and it's transformative, this meaning it's recognized the relationship to words, and that's basically what it's doing behind the scenes. That's the magic of behind the ChatGPT bot. And the two popular ones are ChatGPT and Copilot. And there's different versions of Copilot. There's so many versions now, I'm completely confused, to be honest with you. I call the Bing Copilot the one that's like a bot where you ask questions and get answered. Of course, there's plenty of Copilot. It's in this Teams. You can use it to summarize things by transcribing all the text in there. The difference between the two are listed here. The biggest thing to be aware of is which ones support uploading files on there. Because in this demo, I'm uploading a CSV file in there. Depending on what version you have of Copilot, it may not support that. The same with ChatGPT. And then what kind of documents can you upload? And that's why I listed them here. If I have a CSV file, I want to make sure, or an Excel file, I want to make sure that whatever version I'm using can support that. So pay attention to that thing. Because only the enterprise version of Copilot supports file uploads. At least some of them will support uploading pictures, but to get a full use of what I'm going to demo today, you want something that supports uploading a lot of different types in there. And of course, there's other competing ones like Google Gemini and whatnot in here. But I picked the demo for ChatGPT because Copilot costs extra, and so I wanted to use something you can use right away for free. The results are very similar. They're both using a similar models underneath the cover. So if you do use ChatGPT, Bing Copilot, the enterprise version, you'll see a very similar results. Here's a lot of lists of the ChatGPT versions. This is kind of get the deck and you can look through all this stuff on here. I'm going to show you the demo using the $20 a month, the Plus version, which gives you some newer models and newer features. Really cool stuff coming out. It's amazing how much they've done just in a couple of years. And this is more details about the two versions on here. Again, the file upload, that is the important thing to know. All right, so let's get a little bit into ChatGPT on semi-structured data. So jumping to my ChatGPT on here, the idea being, I got the CSV file and I want to clean some of the data, maybe supplement it, create additional columns on there. And I can do this on ChatGPT. And a lot of people don't realize this. You start out by uploading a file. Okay, I have this movies database here, and I'm going to upload it. And then I'm first going to ask ChatGPT to tell me about this file. So it analyzes it, it pops it into a table, and then sends that CSV file and my question to the large language model, and it comes back and says, here's information about it. Great, 75 of them. And now I'm going to ask some questions of this and see what happens. Now, I always have to say right here, I don't know what the answer is going to be. I've done this demo dozens of times. And if you're familiar with ChatGPT, you know it's not consistent. The answers could be different. I would say 9 times out of 10, this works as I expected and the same, but it could go off and do something different, which I have a backup if that happens in here. But I don't know what to always, I don't always get the same answers on here. So the first thing I'm going to do is list the movies with a rating of 10 on here. So I got the CSV file, it imported in the table, and it's now using that table to ask all the questions. That table is sitting in memory on there. So, okay, this worked good. Here they are. And then I ask it, what's a T-SQL? So if I want to go and have my own SQL engine and I want to repeat what's happening here with a table in a structured database, I can do it. Now I can say, okay, this is great, but now I'm going to get into transforming this data. I want to clean the data. I notice here it says sci-fi. Well, I don't know. I don't like that. I'm going to ask it to change that sci-fi into the full word science fiction, and I'm telling it then to display the updated data set here. And so this is cleaning the data, and okay, great, it worked. You can see it's now science fiction here. And you'll see this little download button here. I can click that and it will download it into a CSV file on my computer, because everything happens now is in a table in memory. And I can even click here and it view analysis. So it's showing me what it did, and you can see it used Python code, which is kind of interesting on here. So now it gets where it gets really cool is, imagine I want to enrich this data, and I watch a lot of movies and I want more information about these. And this is a data set on, and I purposely shrunk it down because sometimes when it's a larger one, I have some issues on here. And this is where I could manually go and add columns to this. For example, if I wanted to get the leading actor and actress in these movies, that could spend a lot of time going and populating that stuff, looking for it now. So I'm having ChatGPT send me hours of time by saying, add 2 more columns, one's a leading actor, one's a leading actress, and go into Wikipedia or IMDb and find that, and then populate it and then display it. And I limit it by the first 10 rows because if I do all of them, sometimes it goes a little haywire in there. So to hopefully be more accurate, and fingers crossed it worked here. You can see it populated all that. Now imagine if I have thousands of rows in this, the time it's saving. And that's the whole idea of ChatGPT. It's a great accelerator. It's saving you a ton of time. And this is a great example of it here. And this looks completely accurate on here. I don't know about this NA. I think previously it may have found something on here. I can go and now start asking it, why is it NA? And it may say, well, this was a animation and there was no male voices in there, or you can see actually it got actor backwards on here. So this should be in the other column here. So this is where a good example of where it doesn't always get the correct going on here. So with everything with ChatGPT, you can check it. But even if it's wrong, I could manually check it and find and fix those errors, but I'm only fixing a handful of them. Now also understand is you could tell it this is wrong and it will go and fix that error usually. And then you can also say, tell me what I could have changed in my prompt so you don't make that mistake again in the future. And I did this to great success when I was trying to, in Microsoft, we have an internal contest of pick the NFL winners. And out of 650 people, I came in like 12th. And I created a prompt to go and help me pick the winners. But it was sometimes wrong. And I would constantly ask it how to fix it. And the prompt get bigger and bigger, but it just got more and more accurate in there. So the bottom line is it will be wrong in some cases, and you could fix it. But even if it's wrong, it could save you a ton of time in there. Let's do another example in there. Another transformation in there. I'm now asking it to add a column called one Oscar and see if and it worked good, if the particular movie won the Best Picture Acts, and it did. This is accurate. American Beauty did win in the year 2000, so that worked good on here. And then the final one is, maybe I want to know what the movie gross is. Again, instead of manually looking up, I just have this pop in there, and it, fingers crossed, it worked. It got the proper movie gross in there. So questions asked, was it get the same results in Gemini? I don't know. I haven't tried Gemini. It'd be a good thing maybe the takeaway for me to start playing with other models. I've done it in ChatGPT, and it's usually pretty close to what we get at ChatGPT in there. And how would you know if you get the wrong or messy answer? That's the $1 million question. And that's why when people say, well, will ChatGPT replace a person's job? And I say, no, because a person can use an accelerator, but you can't have people blindly going and asking questions because they may not know if the answer is correct. So you have to know enough you have to have somebody who knows enough to check the answers to see if it's right. So I get customers ask me, how do I do this in Azure and Fabric? And sometimes I will cut and paste that answer into Copilot, and it gets a long, detailed answer. Well, I have to know enough about Fabric to see if that the answer is right. And if it's wrong, sometimes I will tell Copilot where it got it wrong, and it'll fix it. And I got to know it fixed it right. And then once it gets it right, I copy and paste that answer back on there. But you still have to have that level of people that know it. And that's where this could be challenging. I could look at this and go, well, American Beauty made 356 million. That sounds accurate, but I don't know. Now, maybe I spot check it and all that, but that's always the challenge in there. And maybe one day this is so accurate you don't need to do that anymore. But the bottom line is, this is where any of these models could leave some issues. And the more important the question is for your work environment, the more you may want to double check things. If I'm running some nuclear power plant and I'm asking questions, I don't want to just cut and paste it in there. And you saw like an example of a lawyer got in trouble where it came up with, he was filing a brief, and using ChatGPT, and it came up with use cases or other rulings that didn't exist, and he put it in there, and they said these references don't even exist, and he got quite embarrassed in there. So no great answer to that, but it's a great question on that. And last thing is, you can see it didn't put a download button in here, and maybe 50% of the time it does, but it didn't. It's in this demo, so I can say, well, give me an option to download that and make sure it includes the 4 new columns. And now I'll get a download button, and now I can go and use that CSV file. So you can think of all the time this has saved me. All right, so that's my ChatGPT demo on that. All right, and there's also, I put in there a site called Ask on Data that I've played around with, and it works. It's more accurate with its answers. It doesn't have as much freedom to change things and supplement them in there, but that's one example of what I expect to be many new companies coming out with the ability to transform your data and just be a lot more accurate than just using ChatGPT. All right, now let's talk about Microsoft Fabric. That's got a feature called AI Skill that works on structured data. So that's data sitting in a lakehouse or a warehouse on there. This is a way that you can ask questions on the data that's sitting in Fabric. So if you don't know much about Fabric, think of it as a solution that you can pull in all this data into a warehouse and then use Power BI reports and dashboards, all that, or ad hoc SQL queries on here. But imagine an end user doesn't know about SQL, and the reports that are created are not doing what they want. They can now go and inside of Fabric is one way they can go in there, and they can use a AI skill to ask English questions on the data and get answers in there. Now, they don't have to use just Fabric on there. You can, as I'll demo, you can publish what you create and use it in an example like here within Copilot, within Teams on here. Or you can go and use a Copilot and enhance it with Copilot Studio or Azure iStudio or Foundry or whatever they're calling it now. And it will work on lakehouse warehouses and just release the semantic models and the KQL databases in there. So all these 4, which contain structured data, can be used. And you'll see in the demo, you can train this model to be more accurate and then publish that interface to the model into various other destinations, like I mentioned, and Teams will be a big one on there. How this works with the flow is you're going to go and create an AI skill, which is a bot that you will select data sources and the particular tables that you want to use to ask questions of. You will send in instructions, kind of hints and examples to the large language model to make the answers more accurate. And then you'll optionally publish that to be used outside of Fabric. Digging a little more deeper into what's going on underneath the covers is I have the user question. I'm going to pull the metadata from the tables I select. I'm going to have notes or hints and example questions and SQL queries. All that's going to be gathered up, and using the RAG method is going to be sent to a large language model, which is going to use that to create a SQL query that is going to be executed on the tables that I've selected, and the result's going to come back along with the T-SQL statement that was used on that. So think of that. All this is doing is creating a SQL statement. Hopefully it's a very accurate SQL statement, but now it allows people to use an English questions on top of the data without having to understand SQL or relational databases and all whatnot. Thanks. KQL is Kusto. I need to make that change. And there. If you're using Fabric, you will need to turn on AI skill in order to use it on there. So have your admin turn that on if you want to play with that. So Don asked how you can incorporate structured and unstructured, and I'm going to get that out at the very end. So you're kind of segue guy. That's a good one. That comes in a few slides after the demo. There were so much new features that were just announced yesterday for AI skill. So if you've been using it, be aware through this link that there's new features. The biggest one I felt was a conversational support. Now it'll remember your interaction in there. Before it didn't on that. So this makes for a better experience on there. So other stuff you can read. So now on to the demo. So here I am in Fabric, and there is the ability to create, I'm in a workbook, and there's the ability to create a new item, which is what I'm going to create is AI skill. So I'm going to say this just like I did with ChatGPT. I don't know if this is going to work properly because it's in the preview, and they keep changing it every day, including yesterday. So fingers crossed it works as it has in the past, but a couple times it doesn't give me the answers I like, but we'll get through it. So it's going to say, well, what do you want to call this? And I'm going to say, it's going to call it AdventureWorks AI skill. And then it's going to say, well, okay, what lakehouse or warehouse do you want to use on here? And this is where it's new. It now has a semantic model that it didn't before, as well as KQL databases. And I'm going to choose a AdventureWorks data warehouse that's lakehouse. And I should have said on the slide here, you can recreate this. This is a published demo, and it even shows you how to create this AdventureWorks data warehouse if you want to do this on your own. So I'm going to choose this lakehouse, and then you'll see it's going to pop up all the tables that are inside of this warehouse or lakehouse, and there's a lot that maybe I don't want to bother with. It could be junk tables or stuff I just don't care for end users to have access to. So I would come in here as the first thing and select which tables do I want to use. And there are about 10 tables I'm going to choose. You can see this is a star schema. And I'm going to choose 8 product tables. Count along with me. No, just kidding. And there's the 8. And then I'm going to have 2 fact tables on here. So there's internet sales and reseller sales. Here we go. And that's it. So I'm telling it these are the tables to pull the metadata out of to send to the large language model along with my question. And so the question will be, what is the most sold product on here? Fingers crossed it actually works. Sometimes I just get an error, but then there's the error. So sometimes I got to do this a few times on here. If not, I'll go to my backup plan on here. I'm going to try it 3 times. It's like Dorothy, click your heels 3 times and maybe it's going to work. As again, feel free to pop in questions as we go along here. Still working on it, so maybe we're making progress here. This is the problem with preview software. And okay, so the 3rd time it worked. Now, and this is brand new, if I click on it, it gives you more details of what it's done, because it could have multiple steps, because you're now able to add multiple data sources. I can have multiple data lakes and warehouses and KQL databases, and it could break it down into multiple steps in order to get the right answer in there. And this is the SQL it used on here. Now, I look at this and go, well, wait a minute, though, this is a problem. When I was saying most sold, I wasn't thinking about quantity. I was thinking about the sales amount on that. And so how can I fix this? And this is where hints come into play. So if I come over here and AI instructions, I'm going to give it a hint. When I ask for the most sold, it's not order quantity, it's the total sales, the total sales revenue. So I put that hint in there, and then let me repeat this question, and fingers crossed that this works. And it should change the SQL that it's going to use sales revenue and not the order quantity. And it didn't. Let me try it a couple more times. It's making me look bad, especially for somebody working at Microsoft on that. So what it should come back is with a different answer, and it's not. But that's okay. So pretend it came up with a different answer, and then when I go and use the dig into the steps on there, it should have changed. It didn't. This query to use the sales revenue on there, but you're out of luck in there. So imagine it did. Now I'll give you another example of how can you make this more accurate with not just hints. So if I ask, what is the average sales amount per order by territory? Now, again, it's creating the SQL, passing in the hint, passing in the table metadata on there, and let's see what it comes up with. Okay, that's good. But you know what? What is territory 1? That's not helpful. I need to know exactly what the territory name is. So what I can do is, in addition to giving it a hint, I could go one step further and give an example query on here. So if I click on this, I can say, if somebody asks this question, I want you to respond with this SQL query on here. Now, this is just getting past the large language model, and you hope that it uses that to great effect in there. If the question is exactly the same, you can pretty much guarantee it's going to return this answer. If it's somewhat the same, it may use this as a starting point and then alter it on there. But this is just another hint that you can give it. And if I now come back and try again, let's see if this works. It should replace replace the query from before with my query, where it's going to be more accurate with it's going to be more understanding as it worked, that it replaces the territory with the actual country name, as well as sorted it on that. So the result is the same here, but it's more descriptive. That's it. That's how it works, right? Not a lot to it on here. So the trick is, just like with anything prompt engineering, is to give it enough hints and example SQL queries that you're getting the right answers on there. Now, they got a lot more that they're working on for this to help you make the answers more accurate. And once you are tuning this, then you could say, okay, now I want to make this available for other people to use, so they don't have to go into Fabric on that. So I could, at the top right here, you say I could just share it. So if I know somebody is using Fabric, I can share this with them, and it'll give them a link to go into Fabric and use what I created in there. But many times they don't have Fabric, and instead what I can do is publish this. And what this does is it publishes I don't know what you call it, like an engine, and allows you, if I go and oops, here it is. If I go and look at what was published is right here. This is the URL that I can now go and call within, say, a Spark code, and I'm creating a bot, and I can pass the question in using this URL there. And it's all documented URLs where you can pass stuff and do things with the results that come back on there. So, and you can also, as I said before, publish this to, or share it, I should say, which is kind of a publishing to, I can create a link that some people can click on there. I can also publish it to Teams, PowerPoint. I can send somebody an email, and that's other ways they can use this. And Teams is a popular one that people then can use that as the interface instead of having to use Fabric. All right. Yeah, KQL, I won't get into that, but let's see. Olaf asks, as you use features as an example, mention when the cost per read and the cost per write comes into play, and also the data at rest cost. So this gets into the costs. Now, I don't want to dive too much into that because that can go off on a deep end in there. I'll point out that if you're using Fabric, it used to be that if I wanted to use this functionality, and in particular, as well as if I wanted to use Copilot and anything's a Fabric, the workspace that I create has to be tied to a capacity that's F64 or higher on that. So that means all the workspaces that are using this would have to be upgraded if they're underneath that. But they changed it about a month ago that you can create a own capacity that's specific to Copilot and AI skills, and then assign users that can use that capacity. So you're no longer using the capacity in the workspace, but rather a capacity just for Copilot and AI skills. So that is a big benefit. So you don't have to upgrade all these workspaces to F64. So that's the way it works. So the cost becomes in that F64 capacity, which could be quite expensive on that. So you want to be aware of that. All right. If you now ask for any other fact by territory, will it substitute the territory name every time? Yes, because it's a saved query, and anything that I do here, or if I publish it to it, it's going to use that. In addition, what's new is if I were to tell it inside these hints on here, it remembers everything in the conversation now. So if somewhere in here I said, replace territory 1 with Australia, it would do that and remember the conversation in there. But you generally want to put those in the hints with example queries, but that all becomes part of this workspace that we'll use for any future things. All right, cool. So jumping back to this, so that's the demo on that. So I'm going to pretend everybody's giving me a standing ovation on that. So that's the second of my two demos on there. A lot of people at this point ask, and Carl just put something in the chat, is, well, isn't this very similar to Copilot and within Fabric? And I listed here the key differences. If you're using Copilot within Fabric or Copilot within Power BI to ask questions, which it's the same thing. It's going to take your question, create SQL, and send it along, but you can't configure it. You can't use hints or SQL examples. That's a big difference. Also, Copilot is designed to work within Fabric on notebooks and data warehouses in there, where AI skill is completely separate of Fabric if you publish it out, and could be used within teams and not just limited to Fabric. And then finally, if you look at Copilot and Power BI, that's working against a report or a model that is on the screen in there, where AI skill is for ad hoc queries, as you've seen, and not focused on just a report or a model that you're seeing on the screen in there. And it also works on lake houses and warehouses and KQL databases and whatnot on that. So those are the big differences in there. A couple things on industry use cases on here as examples, and this is getting that question asked before, is combining the two. Imagine now I'm a doctor and I need to come up with some treatment plan for a person, and I want to be as accurate as possible, and I have a bunch of doctor's notes that are, say, in PDF, and lab reports that are in PDF. That's unstructured data. It could be the patient's blood work and doctor notes about questions or answers to questions I ask about their history. I also may have information that could be helpful on that patient's demographics, medications, treatments that are all in relational databases. Now I can combine it all. If I combine all that, and I'll show you architecture what that look like, is I'm going to get a much more accurate answer for a treatment plan compared to just using the PDF documents. We're so used to now doing everything with unstructured data, is now we're opening up a world of pulling in structured data that can make that answer a lot more accurate. Marketing on that. Imagine I'm doing a targeted campaign. I have a lot of unstructured data pulled from social media. I have everybody's Facebook information, and I want to combine that with a person's historical purchase data. And you'd be surprised at how this is being done already, where people can scan my Facebook, figure out who I am, find me in a database, and pull out my purchase information in there, and then come up with a target. They seem to do this in real time. They seem to be listening. I had an example. We went and bought a mattress a few weeks ago. My wife went to the store, purchased this mattress, but didn't give them any information about my email. But all of a sudden, 15 minutes later, I'm scanning the internet, and the mattress company that we purchased from is showing targeted ads about mattresses. Like, how the heck did they figure that out? I don't know. Some of that's really scary. But now it's getting even scarier because they can combine all this data to know exactly what you may need, which could be helpful. I mean, I don't mind Amazon telling me other books I may want to read in there. And of course, you can think of fraud detection. Imagine going in there and taking that unstructured data, which could be call transcripts, emails, legal documents, along with structured data, stuff in your account and financial logs, to help you not get fraud on your account on that. So another example of combining all this stuff. And then I'll also say, because we're in baseball season, imagine using this in baseball, where I could help me with potential trades. And I could do that by getting scouting reports that may be in PDF documents with all the statistics available in the database to help me come up with, hey, who should I trade for? And then even cooler is, imagine during a game taking structured data of the current situation. Here's the batter, here's how he is against righties on a 1-2 count with the bases empty on Sunday afternoons when it's sunny out, and combining that with unstructured and weather condition, spin rate of the ball, and combining that with the structured data or unstructured data, which could be notes written down by coaches as the game's going on, and in real time, combining it all together to give a signal to the catcher to tell the pitcher to throw a fastball on the inside corner. I mean, now this could be done now. I've seen people doing things very similar. Now, Major League Baseball wouldn't allow it on there, but this is where we're at. And you can imagine, especially in baseball, and you have 30 seconds. Was it 30 seconds? The pitch clock is 15 seconds now, but it can be done on that. So it's a really cool example. I have other examples of using this in a soccer and NFL football and whatnot in there. So I just wanted to run some ideas that get your mind spinning how you can do all this together. And then
Hey, James.
a summary of the two ways of now pulling out structured data. So I'll call it the old school or traditional way that before GenAI came around was if I had information in a document and I wanted to use that for a query, I'd have to pull that information out of that document using a product like Azure AI Document Intelligence to pull the numbers and text, and then I'd store it in a database and I'd supplement the database by adding additional columns and whatnot to make the query more accurate in there. So the idea is to take a document, pull out the information into a database, and run the query. That's the old way of doing. The new way of doing things with GenAI is I'm just going to take the database and the documents and send it all to a large language model to get the answer. So an easier way of doing it, and that's what we're seeing. We're going to see a lot of new solutions coming out. And so the last slide of how that may look like, and architecture-wise, and I hopefully one day you'll see this in a product, maybe in Fabric, or other people will build bots that do this. I haven't seen it yet. So the idea would be I would have a user question. It would send that question to a vector database, as I just mentioned before. Same process where it's going to find the documents that are relevant, but also find the documents or the CSV files, that semi-structured data that are relevant. And it's going to send that to the large language model. It's going to send the user question. It's also going to send that question to that published URL to create a query that is going to pass back the results in JSON, and that's going to be sent to the large language model, as well as any other additional system instructions or hints there. So now we're also passing the data from the query results. We're not just getting the query results, but imagine I want to find fraud. Well, sending a AR skill SQL question, creating a SQL question is going to show me the data, but it's just going to show me the results of the data of what I want to look at for fraud. But I want to then send that to the large language model along with this unstructured and semi-structured data to say, go and find the fraud on this. And applying to the previous use cases that I was showing you, this is how it would work to send all that information to a large language model on that. All right. Hopeful blogs, part of this deck. If some of you may know, I published a book or may not know about data architectures, and I always make this available to anybody in a presentation of mine. Send me an email. I'll give you a free copy of the PDF book if you want it on there. It's kind of separate from what I talked about on there, but if you're learning and want to learn about data architectures, which fits in, especially if you're using Fabric, then the book could be helpful in there. So I'll look for some questions in the chat. If you don't get your question answered or you think of something in the future, just send me an email. There's my email address. Happy to answer them there. How do I save the chat? That interface is automatically saved in there. If you wanted to do it in your own separate bot outside of that, you would do what ChatGPT does, is it saves it all to a database. And usually it's Cosmos DB, and then it just makes, anytime you submit a question, it's essentially taking the history of your stuff and sending it to the large language model. That's what works behind the scenes on that. So you would do it the same way. Matthew asks, is it cheating to ask AI to make the database queries instead of creating them manually. Cheating to make the database queries. I'm not sure if I can understand that.
I think what he's saying is, would it be cheating if, for example, you just define your problem and it spills out the query? I think the GitHub Copilot does that in English, right? I think, what's his face from Australia, he had a superb session on that for this very forum about generating your own queries based on natural language models.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is you're creating taking a question and creating the SQL from it, and you can give it examples of that, and you could do all this outside of Fabric, but you'd have to, or outside of Fabric, but you'd have to take the metadata and the hints and put it in there, and you're also not getting the results. You're just getting a result in query, which you have to go back to Fabric. So it's a big shortcut process of doing it all. Okay, Olaf said saving chat. James could probably use the transcript to publish back the chat message. Yeah, that was what I was mentioned before. RAG is retrieval automation generation. I think I got that right on that. And yeah, retrieval automated generation. Thanks, Darby, on that. We got 1 minute. Any other questions? Olaf has already asked for my book. Thanks. Keep them coming on there. Just send me that email. I would ask in return if after you read it to put a review on Amazon. Hopefully it'll be a good review, but understand if you don't think there's improvements, just let me know. Send me an email, and next version of the book I'll change it.
Yeah, we can use it as a door prize for the AI Saturday in Houston. So
Yeah.
I'll reach out to you, my friend.
Or I just got this in the mail, SQL 7. Maybe it's a little bit outdated on there, but we can use that as door prize. That's going to my little historical collection back there.
Cool.
Thank you very
Julie,
much.
Should I stop the recording now?
Yeah, I'll take care of that.
Okay.